Aarav Malhotra, Nandini Malhotra, Rakesh Malhotra, and a 10-year-old boy, the justice system never expected to speak the truth. 4 lives connected inside a quiet American apartment, where one night of silence turned a family into a national mystery and a child into the most dangerous witness of all. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Aarav Malhotra was 10 years old and lived in a small apartment building in New Jersey. The building was old, with narrow hallways and walls that carried every sound. His family had moved from India to the United States when he was very young. His parents believed this country would give them safety, stability, and a fresh start. From the outside, their life looked settled. Aarav went to a nearby public school, wore a backpack bigger than his shoulders, and tried hard to fit in with other children. He spoke English well, but at home, the smell of Indian food and quiet routines reminded him of where his family came from. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room that always felt crowded. Aarav spent most of his time in his room where he felt safest. He liked things in order. His books were arranged carefully, and he noticed when even small things were moved. He was not a noisy child. He observed more than he spoke. Adults often misunderstood his silence as weakness, but in reality, he was constantly aware of his surroundings. His father worked long hours and often returned home tired. His mother stayed mostly inside the apartment. She kept the house very clean, sometimes too clean. Aarav noticed how she wiped the same surfaces again and again, even when they were already spotless. The apartment often felt tense, even during calm moments. There were days when silence filled every corner of the house, making time feel slow and heavy. At night, Aarav sometimes stayed awake longer than he should have. The sounds of the building became clearer after midnight. Footsteps in the hallway, distant doors closing, and the hum of the heating system stayed in his ears. He paid attention to these sounds without knowing why. His mind remembered patterns, like when lights usually turned off or when the apartment became completely quiet. Despite everything, Aarav tried to live like a normal child. He did his homework, watched television, and dreamed about becoming someone important one day. But deep inside, he felt that something was not right. It was not fear exactly, but a sense that the apartment was holding something unseen. The walls felt like they were watching, storing moments that would matter later. The night before everything changed felt different to Aarav. The air inside the apartment felt thick and uncomfortable. Small things stood out to him that he could not explain. Objects were not where they usually were. The quiet felt sharper, almost painful. He did not know that this ordinary-looking apartment in a quiet American city was about to become the center of a case that would shock many people. At 10 years old, Aarav did not understand crime, investigations, or courtrooms. He only knew what he saw, heard, and remembered. Those memories, formed in a quiet apartment far from his original home, were already shaping a future he never chose. The night began like any other, but Aarav sensed something was different even before anything happened. The apartment felt unusually restless. The lights stayed on longer than normal, and sleep did not come easily. Aarav lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds around him. The ticking of the clock felt louder. The hum of the refrigerator echoed through the small space. Every sound seemed sharper, as if his mind was wide awake while the rest of the world slept. Time moved slowly. Aarav noticed footsteps inside the apartment at hours when everyone was usually asleep. He stayed still, pretending to rest, but his attention never drifted. From his room, he could see shadows moving under the door as lights switched on and off. Objects made soft sounds when they were placed down or picked up. These were small things, but they did not match the normal routine of the house. As the night grew deeper, the tension became heavier. The air felt cold and uncomfortable, even though the heating was on. Aarav felt a strange pressure in his chest, a feeling he had never experienced before. He did not cry or panic. Instead, he watched and remembered. His young mind recorded everything without knowing why it mattered. At some point, the apartment went completely silent. The silence was not peaceful. It felt sudden, forced, and unnatural. Aarav stayed awake for a long time after that, unsure if he should move or stay still. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and he drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning arrived with confusion and noise. Aarav woke up to sounds he did not recognize, Doors slammed, footsteps rushed through the hallway, and unfamiliar voices filled the apartment. The calm of the night was replaced by chaos. When he stepped out of his room, the scene before him did not make sense. His father was not moving. The apartment looked different, disturbed, yet strangely clean in some areas. Soon, the building was filled with police officers. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in strange colors. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering and staring. Aarav was guided away from the apartment, wrapped in a blanket that felt too heavy for his small body. He did not fully understand what had happened, but he knew something terrible had changed his life forever. The police searched every corner of the apartment. They asked questions, took photographs, and collected objects. Aarav watched quietly from a distance. His eyes moved across the scene, noticing details others overlooked. He remembered where things had been the night before and how they looked now. By afternoon, the news spread through the neighborhood. A man was dead. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked. The mystery deepened with every hour. Aarav sat alone, surrounded by adults who spoke in serious tones. No one realized that the quiet child in the corner carried pieces of the truth inside his memory. That night did not just take his father away. It marked the beginning of a story that would follow Aarav for years. A single night, filled with silence and shadows, had changed everything. As the investigation moved forward, attention slowly turned toward Aarav's mother, Nandini Malhotra. At first, she appeared like a grieving wife, calm and controlled, showing little emotion in front of officers and neighbors. But as the hours passed, small details began to raise questions. Her behavior did not fully match the situation. She stayed unusually composed, even when surrounded by police activity and constant questioning. Investigators carefully reviewed the timeline of the night. Nandini's account of events seemed clear on the surface, but certain parts felt incomplete. There were gaps that could not be explained easily. She claimed nothing unusual had happened, yet the apartment told a different story. Some areas were cleaned too well, especially the kitchen and bathroom. Other areas looked disturbed, as if something had been moved and then placed back incorrectly. The police found no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows were locked from the inside. This meant the crime likely involved someone already inside the apartment. That fact narrowed the list of suspects immediately. Financial records also brought new concerns. The family had been under pressure. Bills were unpaid, and recent transactions suggested hidden stress. Investigators began to wonder if the calm surface of the household was hiding deeper problems. Neighbors were questioned one by one. Most reported hearing nothing unusual during the night. No screams, no loud arguments, no signs of struggle. This made the case even more confusing. A crime had clearly taken place, yet it left almost no noise behind. The silence itself became suspicious. As the hours turned into days, Nandini remained under close observation. Her movements, expressions, and reactions were noted carefully. Some officers felt something was off, but suspicion alone was not enough. There was still no direct proof linking her to the crime. The case balanced between doubt and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Aarav was kept away from the apartment. He was placed under temporary care, surrounded by social workers and specialists. Everyone assumed he was too young to contribute anything meaningful to the investigation. He was seen as a fragile child who needed protection, not someone with answers. No one realized that he had already noticed things adults had missed. Investigators began to feel pressure. Without strong evidence, the case risked slowing down. Public attention grew as news spread about the mysterious death inside a locked apartment. The idea that a crime could happen without noise or witnesses disturbed many people. Behind closed doors, the police continued analyzing every detail. The clean surfaces, the altered scene, and the missing explanations pointed in one direction, but they needed something solid, something undeniable. What they did not know yet was that the key to the case was not hidden in documents or forensic reports. It was quietly waiting inside the memory of a 10-year-old boy, ready to change everything. Aarav was moved into a quiet, temporary home away from the apartment. The place was clean and calm, but it did not feel like home. Adults spoke gently around him and avoided heavy topics, believing he was too young to understand what had happened. They focused on keeping him comfortable, giving him toys, books, and regular meals. Aarav accepted everything silently. He did not ask many questions. His mind was busy replaying moments from that night again and again. Specialists were brought in to check on his mental and emotional health. They asked him simple questions about his daily life, his school, and his hobbies. Aarav answered politely, but his thoughts often drifted back to the apartment. Small details kept returning to him without effort. The position of objects, the timing of movements, and the way the silence suddenly changed all stayed clear in his mind. During routine evaluations, Aarav began mentioning things casually. He spoke about what he noticed before sleeping and what felt unusual. He did not attach emotions to these memories. He described them the way someone would describe the weather. The adults listening at first thought he was imagining things, but as he continued, patterns began to form. His memories were consistent, detailed, and steady. Unlike most children his age, Aarav did not mix imagination with reality. He did not exaggerate or add dramatic details. What made his account different was how precise it was. He remembered timing without looking at a clock. He recalled which lights were on and which were off. He remembered sounds that were out of place and movements that did not match the usual routine of the house. Professionals started taking notes. They realized Aarav was not reacting emotionally because he did not yet understand the meaning of what he had witnessed. To him, these were just observations, but to trained ears, his words carried weight. His memory filled gaps the investigation had been struggling with. As sessions continued, Aarav's recollections became clearer. He mentioned details that directly connected to unanswered questions in the case. Investigators were informed carefully, ensuring Aarav was not pressured or influenced. Every step was taken slowly to protect him. Even so, it became clear that the quiet child held information no one else could provide. What surprised everyone most was how calm Aarav remained. He did not cry or show fear when recalling events. He simply remembered. That calmness made his account even more believable. Experts confirmed that his cognitive responses showed no signs of coaching or confusion. Behind the scenes, the investigation shifted direction. What was once uncertain began to take shape. Aarav was no longer just a child affected by a crime. He had unknowingly become a witness. His memory, formed in silence, was now speaking louder than any physical evidence. Without realizing it, Aarav had stepped into a role that would change the case forever. His quiet observations were turning into the strongest thread of truth, pulling the investigation toward a conclusion no one had expected. Once investigators reviewed the information that came from Aarav's memories, they returned to the apartment with a different mindset. What had earlier seemed ordinary now appeared carefully arranged. Every room was examined again, this time with attention to the smallest details. Officers measured distances, checked surfaces, and compared current conditions with photographs taken on the first day. The apartment was no longer just a crime scene. It was a puzzle. One detail Aarav had mentioned stood out strongly. Based on that, the police searched through items that were previously ignored. Trash bags that had already been dismissed were reopened. Inside one of them, they found an object wrapped in layers of plastic. It was something that did not belong there and had no innocent explanation. This discovery changed the direction of the investigation instantly. Forensic teams analyzed the object and confirmed it had been cleaned recently. Traces remained, though faint, and they matched the type of injury that caused the death. This proved that the scene had been altered after the incident. What looked clean was not clean by habit, but by intention. Digital evidence was reviewed next. Phone records, movement logs, and usage data painted a clearer picture of the night. Timelines that once seemed uncertain now aligned perfectly with what Aarav had remembered. The silence of the apartment, the unusual movements, and the sudden change in routine all found support in data. Investigators also noticed that certain items were missing from their expected locations. When questioned, explanations did not hold up against the evidence. The case, once fragile, was now gaining strength. Each discovery supported the same conclusion. What made the situation more disturbing was how close the evidence had been all along. The truth was not hidden far away. It had been inside the apartment from the beginning, overlooked, because no one thought to look there. It took the memory of a child to point investigators in the right direction. Experts reconstructed the sequence of events. Step by step, they built a timeline that matched both physical findings and Aarav's account. There were no longer gaps. The story made sense, and it was deeply unsettling. Behind closed doors, officials acknowledged that without Aarav's observations, the case might have remained unresolved. His quiet attention to detail had uncovered what experience and technology had missed. As evidence continued to surface, the case became impossible to ignore. What started as suspicion was now supported by facts. The apartment, once a place of silence, had finally revealed its secrets, and those secrets were leading straight toward the truth. When the case reached the courtroom, the atmosphere changed completely. What had once been a quiet investigation became a matter of public attention. The room was filled with officials, experts, and observers who understood the seriousness of the situation. At the center of it all was the evidence that had slowly come together, piece by piece. Every detail mattered now, and nothing was treated lightly. Aarav's involvement was handled with extreme care. Specialists explained his observations in a structured way, making sure the process did not harm him emotionally. His role was not presented as dramatic or sensational. Instead, it was shown as factual, steady, and supported by professional evaluations. The court focused on the reliability of his memory rather than his age. Psychologists presented detailed assessments explaining how Aarav's mind processed information. They described how some children, especially quiet and observant ones, can remember details with surprising accuracy. Tests confirmed that his recollections were consistent over time. There were no contradictions, no signs of confusion, and no evidence of influence from adults. This gave his account strong credibility. The physical evidence was then presented alongside the timeline Aarav had described. Forensic reports matched the sequence of events he remembered. Digital records supported the same timeframe. The cleaned surfaces, the hidden object, and the altered scene all fit into a single, clear narrative. What once seemed like separate clues now formed a complete picture. As the case unfolded, the courtroom grew silent during key moments. The facts spoke for themselves. There was no need for emotional appeals. The evidence was methodical, logical, and strong. Each point reinforced the next, leaving little room for doubt. Experts explained how the crime scene had been staged to appear normal. They detailed the deliberate steps taken to erase signs of struggle. This explanation connected directly with Aarav's memory of how the apartment felt different that night. His observations were no longer seen as simple childhood impressions, but as accurate reflections of a carefully controlled environment. The legal process moved forward steadily. Every claim was examined, challenged, and verified. Aarav remained protected throughout, shielded from unnecessary exposure. His presence was felt without being physically overwhelming. The case did not rely on emotion, it relied on truth. By the end of the proceedings, it was clear that the smallest witness had carried the strongest weight. The courtroom had become the place where silence was finally broken, not by loud voices, but by facts remembered by a 10-year-old child. When the verdict was finally announced, the courtroom did not react loudly. There were no gasps or sudden movements. Instead, a heavy stillness settled over the room. The decision confirmed what the evidence had been building toward for months. Aarav's mother was found guilty. The judgment was firm, supported by facts that could no longer be denied. For many people following the case, the outcome was shocking, not because of doubt, but because of what it represented. News of the verdict spread quickly across the country. Media outlets focused on one detail above all others. A 10-year-old child had played a key role in exposing the truth. The case became one of the most discussed true crime stories in the United States. People struggled to understand how a crime could occur inside a family, hidden behind routine and silence. The idea that a mother could be responsible unsettled many, challenging deeply held beliefs about trust and safety. Public reaction was divided. Some viewed Aarav as incredibly brave, someone who helped justice move forward despite unimaginable circumstances. Others saw him only as a victim, a child forced into a situation no one his age should ever face. Discussions filled television programs and online forums, analyzing every part of the case. Yet behind all the noise, Aarav remained largely unseen. For Aarav, the verdict did not feel like an ending. It felt like a door closing on a life that no longer existed. He did not celebrate or feel relief the way adults expected. The courtroom decision did not return his father or restore his family. Instead, it confirmed that everything he once knew was gone. The truth had come out, but it left behind emptiness. Professionals working with Aarav noticed changes after the verdict. He became quieter, more withdrawn. The weight of understanding slowly reached him. He began to realize the meaning of his role and the permanence of the outcome. What once felt like simple memories had reshaped his entire future. The legal system considered the case closed, but emotionally it remained open. Aarav's childhood had been divided into before and after that night. The verdict marked the official end of the trial, but not the end of its impact. His name appeared in reports, though later protected, and his story became a reference point in discussions about child witnesses. As time passed, the case stood as a reminder of how truth can emerge from unexpected places. It showed how silence can hide reality and how even the smallest voice, when supported by facts, can change everything. For Aarav, the verdict was not just a legal conclusion. It was the moment his life permanently shifted, shaped by a truth that could never be undone. Years passed after the case, and Aarav's life slowly moved into a different direction. He was relocated to another state under a new identity, far from the apartment, the courtroom, and the constant attention. The move was meant to give him a chance to grow without being tied to a story that had already taken so much from him. His new surroundings were quieter, unfamiliar, and free from reminders of the past. School became his main focus. Aarav kept to himself and avoided attention. Teachers described him as disciplined and thoughtful, someone who listened more than he spoke. He performed well academically, especially in subjects that required logic and memory. Few people knew anything about his past. To them, he was just another student trying to build a future. Even with distance, the memories never fully disappeared. They became quieter over time, less sharp, but always present. Aarav learned to live with them rather than fight them. Therapy helped him understand that remembering the truth did not make him responsible for the outcome. What happened was not his choice, and carrying that truth was not a burden he had created. As he grew older, Aarav began to understand the wider impact of his story. He learned that his case was studied by professionals who worked with children in the legal system. His experience helped change how young witnesses were treated and protected. Knowing this gave him a sense of purpose he had never expected. He stayed away from media and refused interviews. He did not want his identity to be shaped by a single event. Instead, he focused on building a life defined by stability and independence. He dreamed of working in a field where observation and attention to detail mattered, turning what once haunted him into strength. Occasionally, he reflected on how a quiet night in a small apartment had altered everything. He understood now that truth does not announce itself loudly. Sometimes it exists in silence, waiting for someone to notice. Aarav had been that person, not by choice, but by circumstance. The case remained one of the most disturbing true crime stories involving a child witness in the United States. For the public, it was a story of justice and shock. For Aarav, it was a chapter of life that shaped him but did not define him entirely. In the end, Aarav moved forward, carrying resilience rather than fear. His story stood as proof that even in the darkest situations, truth can survive, remembered by those brave enough to hold on to it.